Good morning. Welcome to the podcast, A House Built on Sand with Jabril Khalif Al-Sadat and Mark Hunter Brooks. We're going to talk about mysticism today. And just Jabril and I were talking, we both have mystical tendencies. So we could talk about mysticism probably in 2, 3, or 4 podcasts, but we're going to try and condense it down to one and see how much of a response we get from people. But we're talking about things that are beyond the physical. And as we've talked in earlier podcasts, we've said, it's important for you to know who you are and what you believe. And that gives you a grounding for your life. And that's one of the things you should learn early in life, even if you start out with just the basics of right and wrong. Know who you are, know what you believe. And then once you get that baseline, once you get that foundation, expand from that and learn how to love many different types of people, how to love selflessly, how to persevere in defending what you believe, and develop moral courage in being able to support those other people that you believe should be supported. But we're going to talk about beyond the physical today. We're going to talk about wisdom and how that contributes to a spiritual life. And I wanted to start off with a little exercise just to kind of get us thinking in terms of other perspectives. So imagine that your body is the 3 corners of a 3-dimensional graph, and if you stick your arms out 45 degrees away from yourself, one arm is going to be your x-axis, one arm is going to be your y-axis, and your head is going to be your z-axis. So you've got X, Y, and Z. You've got a corner of a square right there in your body, and from a dimension standpoint, and this is all these physicists and cosmologists and stuff, they say each dimension is 90 degrees opposed to another one. So, if from X to Y, you've got 90 degrees, from Y to Z, and X to Z, you got 90 degrees. But where's the 4th dimension? Where's the 4th dimension? And people say there's higher dimensions, there's more so than ourselves, and they have different ideas for it. But I wanted to give you one other idea to kind of lead us into this discussion of mysticism. So imagine I'm going to hold this up here if I can, probably better to hold it off. Imagine this is you, and this is that 3-dimensional corner of a square that we just talked about. You've got X, you've got Y, and you've got Z. But if you want to go into the 4th dimension, what's left is to go inside yourself. To go inside yourself. And that's the whole purpose of this 3D printed model, is to say to go between dimensions, you've got to go inside yourself. And that's how some people will say out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences and stuff. But it's the same thing with mysticism and spirituality. You've got to go inside yourself to go to something beyond your physical existence. So that's sort of the intro to mysticism. There's people that follow the spiritual paths their entire lives. And they'll try workshops and seminars. They'll do peak experiences. They'll go to Burning Man. They'll go to different yurts and sweat lodges. They'll do different religious experiences, all in the belief that there's something more to life than what it is. And it's ultimately answering this question: why are we here? And you have scientists that will tell you, your consciousness is just neurons firing in your brain. And when you die, your consciousness dies, and that's it. And all you have is your physical existence. And then that leaves you with this big hole in your soul, saying, why am I here if there's no reason for me to be here? And a lot of people, and a number of people in life today, especially young people, they have this lack of a sense of purpose because they don't have a belief in something that's greater than themselves. But you'll find that in older people, uh, people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s today, they have a different perspective. And they do have a belief in something that's greater than themselves. And I think that ultimately gives them a purpose in life. But it's something much greater than just having a purpose in life and being able to live your life with purpose. It's living a spiritual life. And I know, as Jabril likes to say, Islam is a way of life. It's not a religion. So it's the same thing with these other religions. Is you have to adopt that into a way of life, a way of being, because it's evolving you spiritually, just like we're all evolving physically on earth. You're evolving spiritually as well, and I think I've mentioned that in some earlier podcasts. I'll just briefly refer back to it. In chapter 3 of The Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins did this computer program to prove the power of physical evolution. And he showed how a routine that would allow you to pass information from one iteration to another, or in life, one generation to another, allows you to grow at an exponential rate. And it's the same thing spiritually. We have unchanging scripture that'll teach you about an intellectual understanding of spirituality, and that's from multiple religions. And as you get into religion, you'll find that most of the religions teach the same thing. And I'll leave Jabril to talk about his analogy about a boat on a dock. But you're learning how to paddle or how to row, and ultimately the journey's going to be your own. And that's what's going to lead you to this point of mysticism, is this gathering of knowledge that's going to lead to a gathering of wisdom as you match that knowledge to your life experiences. But we're going to talk about that, as well as just things that are greater than our physical existence today. And with that, I'll let Jabril jump in, and we'll get this thing really hopping. So this is going to be a good presentation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, then that was a lot. Thank you, Mark. First thing, we'll get back to the analogy you were saying about the dock and the boat and the rope. You need the dock. Not that I don't think an atheist is going to be a mystic, because mysticism, we'll get to the definition of it, is trying to get closer to a creator. And if you're an atheist, you don't believe in the creator. So it's an oxymoron to say an atheistic mystic. So it wouldn't be it. It wouldn't happen. But getting back to the analogy I was using, is that the dock is a religion, no matter what religion you belong to. The dock is the religion that you belong to, that holds you down, that is moored into the earth that leads out into the sea. The rope is what moors you to that dock if you out into the boat. The boat is how you searching for your way in this life. In every religion, there's a mystical part of religion. Now, the word mystical comes from the Greek, which means mitis, which is an initiate. An initiative was somebody who belonged to one of the mystery cults, either the illusion cults or the Orestian cult, Orphean courts. I'm sorry, to belong to the mystery cults. And what their job was to try to have communion with the gods. And that's what a mystic is. A mystic is nobody hiding in shadows, or somebody that's deep and dark and secret and mysterious or something like that. It's just a person who's trying to search internally to be closer to his creator. Now, you have two things when it comes to religion or philosophy. You have the esoteric, which is the external, the outside religion. The religions that you do, the praying, the reading of your revealed text or your religious text, the communion with your fellow parishioners and stuff like that. And then you have the esoteric part of religion, what we would call the spiritual part of religion. The part of religion that takes you inside of yourself. The part of your religion that tells you, how to be a better person, how to be a good person, how to do the right things. This is the esoteric part of you that after you develop it, after you're on the boat in the sea and you're developing it, then you want to cut the line away from your religion. And that's when you go into mysticism. That's when you go into the deeper part of who you are. That's when you go into searching for your creator and getting close to him. Now, there's two different forms of mysticism, one in the East and in the West. In the East, a mystic tries to become part of the creator. In the West, and when I say West, I'm talking about the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. You want to become closer to your creator because your creator is more distant from you in the Abrahamic religions than in the East. And you cannot become part of your divine, even though part of the divine is within you. And those are the two distinctions between when you're in the East and the West. And in Buddhism, even though there's a theist religion, the Buddhists try to reach for nirvana, and nirvana gets them closer to the divine. In yoga, you try to, the Atman is the Brahman, as they say. The soul is the divine. In Judaism, the Kabbalah, in Christianity and some of the old Christian mystics, and in Islam and Sufism, you try to get closer to your creator, closer to Allah, closer to Elohim, closer to Jesus. You try to get closer to them. And that's what mysticism is all about. Mysticism is about contemplating. Mysticism is about being meditative. Because mysticism is about being reflective. But the very first thing you must do to understand about being a mystic is what was in the old Greek mystery, over the door of the old Greek mystery temples, which is know thyself. Mm-hmm. Most people, if you ask them if they know thyself, know who they are, they say, yeah, I know who I am, because that's the ego speaking. That's the arrogance of being a human being. We say, yes, we know ourselves. We don't. Most of us don't know ourselves. It's the same thing when you're in a relationship. I've been married, 43 years. And, most people in my position would say, I know my wife. I've been married to her for 43 years. I know her. And I tell my wife every day, I don't know you. And you don't know me. Because you can't. Because each one of us always hides part of ourselves from everybody else and from the world. So how can you know me if I'm hiding part of myself? Or how can I know you if you're hiding part of yourself? And then also, how can I know you if you don't know yourself? And how can you know me if I don't know myself? It's impossible. So, if we living under the false thing that we can know someone else, and we hear it every day, I know this person, I know them. Yeah, but I bet you that same person who's saying I know them don't even know who they are. And it takes time. It takes years. Sometimes it never happens. Mm-hmm. So that's what the beginning of being a mystic is all about. Understanding that there's a creator. There's something greater than yourself. Number two, understanding that you are a spiritual human being. That this mortal body is finite. This mortal body will decay. This mortal body will die. It's like Socrates said, to understand philosophy is to understand death. To understand being a mystic is to understand death. Because death is not the ending, but the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's the beginning of life, not a mortal life, but the true life. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to Allah you came, and to Allah you shall return. Jesus said, come to me. You know, we all going back home. The thing is to understand, can we get closer to our Creator before we get there? Why are we here? You know, in the Christian Bible, you know, God said, I have made man so I can be known. So what does that mean? So he can be known. It doesn't mean that God had an ego and said, okay, the birds don't know me, the lions don't know me, the elephant don't know me, the plant don't know me, the tree don't know me. That's a lie. All things in this universe know the Creator. It is man and his arrogance, with his ego, I should say human beings, with his ego, that refuse to recognize something higher than himself. And that's why we have to work on it. That's why we have to understand that we are finite human beings that live spiritually and reach out towards the unseen. We have to recognize as human beings the seen and the unseen. And we have to understand that we have to go between reasons. As Aristotle said, we are rational human beings. We are rational animals. But we have to go past the reason to the intuitive to understand the spiritual part of who we are. And that's all it is. There's a lot of mocking fun. People say, oh, you're a mystic. All right, man, you know, go disappear somewhere and come back like you're a wizard. You know, like you part of Harry Potter's troop. Or you're possibly. There's, you know, we get caught up with miracles. You know, if I was in the 19th century or the 18th, if I was in the 18th century or the 19th century and I seen a plane up in the air, you know what I would say? That's a miracle.
Yeah.
Yesterday miracles are today's science fact. That's all it is. That's all it is. You know, if Jesus turned wine into water.
Water into wine.
Water into wine, I'm sorry. Forgive me for my theological mistake. If he turned water into wine, I'm sure somebody today can do the same thing. It's just, that's all it is. You know, what we call miracles today, 200-300 years will be scientific fact if human beings last that long. That's it.
So
but, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and that conversation is really underscoring the importance of having a plan or a path or a roadmap for that journey. And you know, we've talked about this before too. It's important to have an understanding of the spiritual journey that you're taking and the route that you're taking and how you do that. And there's a number of different people over the centuries that have written about it. Many times they're monastics, many times they're mystics, both in the East and the West, who have talked about their own path. And it's important for you to understand that and adopt a path so that you can grow spiritually. And as Jabril was saying, you know, you've got to learn how to be comfortable in that boat and learn how to row or how to paddle. But ultimately, you want to cut that rope away from the dock and go off on your own. But that's going to require a certain amount of growth in your own sense, in grounding and creating a foundation of spirituality in your own sense before you can do that. The younger you do that or accomplish that point, the better off you're going to be. And I'll use a financial analogy for this, and I've told this to my daughter, but it's important for people, you know, just starting out in life as well. Is imagine you're out getting a job, you're 22. If you put money back for your retirement, let's say you put $1,000 back every year from age 22 to 29, and assume a constant rate of growth or a constant rate of interest, you'll have more money at 59 than if you started at 29 and started putting $1,000 back from 29 to 59. And that's the principle of compounding or you know, the growth of interest. But it applies to your spiritual development as well. the younger you start with developing spiritually, the farther you can go, the greater you'll grow. And most people don't really get interested in this until they're in their 50s and 60s. So if you can be interested or can become interested or understand the importance of it in your teens, in your 20s, and your 30s, and start trying to find, number one, find a roadmap that'll lead you on a journey. Don't go off and start journeying just, on your own. Find a roadmap first that'll give you an idea. Then that will help direct your path. And you don't have to be constantly on this spiritual path. I know some people are just obsessed with it, and that's okay. That's where they are. That you can do a little bit all along the way and accomplish just as much, as opposed to focusing on something for a year or 2 years. And I'm guilty of doing the latter part. Is, I focused on this for uh, probably 3.5 years between 2015 and 2018, 2019, uh, almost full time, and did the stuff. But that was just me and who I am. I did nothing in the years before. I started having spiritual experiences in 2003, had a spiritual crisis in 2008, 2009, and then just started going whole hog on it in 2015 to 2019. And I've been doing it partially 2019 to today. But it takes a long time, but people mature at different rates, and they also may or may not have a roadmap. I didn't have a roadmap. I found a roadmap in 2015, 2016. So that's why I'm just saying that it's good. And Jabril, I'm going to ask you to hold your book up. One good book is the book Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. And Jabril and I both have it. We didn't buy it for this podcast, but it was first written in 1911. It was 100 years old. And she outlines a lot of really, really, really good stuff in here. And it went through 12 editions. But you'll find if you study the esoteric, or if you study mysticism, in the 1880s to the 1920s, there was a big spiritual awakening, and there were a lot of very, 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 very good books written on that, but they've all been tossed to the side. And this book by Evelyn Underhill is a really good one. But as Jabril was talking about it, saying there's more to life than what we physically know, mystics understand that to varying degrees, and you also understand that to varying degrees, because everyone has had some kind of spiritual experience. They've had something that's happened to them that they didn't understand. They've known when someone had died that they weren't with. They may have had a near-death experience. They may have been with someone as they were dying and got carted off into some spiritual experience, experiencing that other person as they're going through their life review. That's called a shared death experience, if you want to look it up on Google. People have had out-of-body experiences. People are intuitives. They can heal with energy, or they can talk as a medium would between dimensions. They've done all these things that can't be explained, and some people would say is evil or of the devil or taboo or whatever. But it's things that aren't part of this world. And the one thing I would want to say is, don't be afraid of it. I'm not saying get involved in it. I'm saying don't be afraid of it, because that's where I think humanity will find that there is a reality beyond what we know in the physical world. And it's gonna the ultimate truth is gonna be bigger than any one area. It's gonna be bigger than the established religions, East and West. It's gonna be bigger than science, and it's gonna be bigger than the metaphysical world right now, because theology, they have an understanding that, in my mind, and I'll just be honest, I think it's ritual informed. They've lost a lot of the spirituality that once was. On the science side, they have an understanding of reality that may not be correct. It may be bigger than what we understand, broader than the 3 dimensions and time that people understand, and broader than the 11 or 13 dimensions that string theorists and people who believe in quantum mechanics say, or that may be a different application of it. And then the people in the metaphysical area, everyone says that's pseudoscience or taboo, but those guys have an idea that there's something more than what's going on, but they don't understand why. They just know it, and they teach it and say, if you do this, this will happen, and many times it will. But they don't tell you why, and you don't understand the answer. And we can't tell. And let me say, we can't tell you the answer. We can tell you what we believe, but you ultimately have to find that answer. You ultimately have to go on that spiritual journey to discover for yourself and embody it into yourself as to who you are, um, spiritually as well as physically. And we can't do it for you. You know, I could tell you, and Jabril could tell you, you know, there is something beyond our physical existence. And I can tell you from a Christian spiritual perspective, I said everything in the New Testament, when all the things that Jesus talked about in Revelation and the Gospels about the hereafter, the invisible world, it's all true. It's all real. And I'll tell you 100%. That's my belief. Can I prove it? I'm going to try and do it this year, and this is an allusion to some things that I may talk about in a couple months. But it is there. It's there beyond, but you have to be ready for it. You have to be able to quiet your mind, so that you can be open to those perceptions. You have to purify your heart so that you can be to a point to where they'll come and they'll resonate with you. But that's something that you can do now by studying a religion, by becoming involved in their practices so that you can understand their spirituality, but eventually you're going to grow beyond it. And just to give you an idea of something that is beyond, and you'll hear and see and read more about this kind of stuff if you get into some of the metaphysical literature. We're actually beings of light. We're actually spiritual beings. The paranormal abilities that people exhibit, or that they say they exhibit, or that they claim they exhibit, they're real. And those are spiritual abilities. Those are how spiritual beings communicate, travel, and manipulate objects. And I can't prove it to you. You have to figure it out for yourself. You have to go on your spiritual journey, find your roadmap first, and figure it out. But let me read you a passage from Tom Campbell's book called My Big Toe. He's a PhD engineer, but he helped Robert Monroe in the 1970s set up his initial laboratory doing out of body and expansion of consciousness work. So Monroe was exchanging these out of body journeys with Tom Campbell and another fellow named Dennis, and as compensation for them helping him set up his labs. So here's a story that is from page 85 and 86 of Tom Campbell's book, My Big Toe. And this has driven Tom Campbell's life. If you know Tom Campbell now, he's doing his own experiments. He's done a GoFundMe, or what do you call it? Well, anyway, a fundraising to do an experiment that he's saying is going to help prove that another reality exists. But this is what drove it, and this is what happened to him in the 1970s. He said one of the first experiments, these out-of-body experiments, was for Dennis and me to take a trip in the non-physical together. Our independent descriptions of what we were experiencing should correlate closely to the experience, or if the experience were real and independent of either of us. Dennis and I quickly achieved the appropriate altered state, left our bodies, and met in the non-physical as planned. Robert Monroe let us go for a long time before he ended the session and called us back. Listen to this, Bob said emphatically. The tapes, and these were reel-to-reel tapes back then, rewound as we disconnected electrodes and climbed out of our chambers, began to roll forward. We sat down and listened. The correlation was astonishing. For almost 2 hours, we sat there with our mouths open, hooting and exclaiming, filling in the details for each other. And this is the important part. He said, I was dumbfounded. There was only one good explanation. This stuff was real. The undeniable fact was we had seen the same visuals, heard the same telepathic conversations, and experienced the same clarity. This stuff might actually be real, I said aloud, and to no one in particular. I said these same 6 words, this stuff might actually be real, over and over to myself 50 times during the next few days. I couldn't believe it, but I had to, because I was there. And That's just one example. It's one person's experience, but there's multiple people who would tell you that there's something more that's out there. I've also had people tell me that they've had similar experiences when they've done guided meditations, holding someone else's hand, where they both went on the same guided meditation together. But that's the only way that you'll know that there's something real out there, is if you have somebody else that can corroborate what you've seen. Otherwise, you'll just say, I just had a dream, or I just had this experience, and you'll write it off. But when you have somebody else that can corroborate what you said, then it sets you on a different path. But that's when you get into some of the reality that something else exists. But you've got to find it and be open to it by developing this spirituality, developing this your religious understanding, applying it to the reality of your life, and reconciling it and internalizing it, developing wisdom, as Jabril was saying, and understanding philosophy. It's all part of it, but it all brings you to that point to where you will understand and know that there's something beyond our physical life. And that's what's important in all this. And also too, from this spiritual evolution standpoint, when I was talking about Richard Dawkins and this computer program, you've got to pass it on to your children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren. If you don't have that understanding, ask your grandparents and ask your parents what their spiritual experiences are and were, so that you can take that knowledge and apply it to your own spiritual evolution. Don't go off without having that intergenerational transfer of knowledge and wisdom and understanding as you go off on your path. So sorry, I was long-winded.
That's all right, because it's time to cut this short. But because this is such a deep and involved conversation and about a topic, we're going to continue it. So we'll call this Mysticism 1, Part 1. And then next week we'll do Mysticism Part 2. And we'll go a little bit more deeply into what we were talking about and elaborate on what we were talking about today. So I hope you'll join us, and we can expand a little bit further, and we can talk about what are some of these experiences that these mystics have, and how do they reach these experiences? How do they get there? Do they need a teacher? Do you need someone to show you the way, to guide you, to before you cut the rope, to tell you which stages that you have to go through? So I'll be looking forward to, me, Mark, and I myself are looking forward to elaborating more about mysticism, because it is an important subject, because we are spiritual beings, and we need to know how to traverse this part of the unseen, just like we have teachers to help us traverse the seen world that we live in now. So for right now, I want to say ma salama, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Take care, everybody.